Have you ever felt that restless tug in your soul? That sense that something bigger is calling your name, yet you can't quite see the full picture? Maybe you've watched your friends soar into new opportunities and wondered why you're still standing in place. Perhaps you've asked yourself, God, when is it my time to rise? Why am I here, feeling isolated, separated from everyone else? That question can sting. It can keep you up at night. But let me tell you something right now. That loneliness, that moment of isolation, it's not a punishment. It's a preparation. Sometimes God needs you to be alone before he elevates you. Sometimes God needs your undivided attention, your unfiltered heart, so he can plant seeds in soil that's finally quiet enough to let his voice resonate. Right here, right now, I want you to open your mind to the possibility that your isolation is where your greatest transformation begins. I stand before you today because I know how it feels to question whether you've been left behind. I've wrestled with my own doubts too. But I discovered a remarkable truth. When you're alone, when you're cut off from the crowd, when the usual noise fades away, that's precisely the moment you become available for divine instruction. See, when the phone stops ringing, when your social calendar clears out and all those voices in your ear go silent, you finally begin to hear a different frequency. You start to hear God's whispers. It's in that space of solitude that you realize you're not abandoned. You're actually being called higher. This is no coincidence. When it feels like friends have vanished, opportunities have dried up, or obstacles have forced you into solitude, that might be the perfect setup for growth. It's in these quiet corners of your journey that the real work happens. You get honest with yourself. You face your flaws, your fears, your ambitions. You face the parts of yourself that are hungry for more, the parts that have been begging for attention. And let me tell you, when God places you in that environment, he's refining you, he's purifying you of distractions. He's stripping away what no longer serves you and molding you into the person you were designed to be. Because you and I both know you can't climb to the next level weighted down by old baggage. You can't answer the door to your destiny if your hands are full of yesterday's clutter. The reason this conversation matters so deeply is that we often mistake solitude for loneliness. We view being alone as some sort of defeat, something to escape. But if you run from these moments too quickly, you'll miss the critical lessons they hold. You'll miss the chance to align with a purpose larger than yourself. You'll miss the subtle instructions that God whispers in your ear, instructions that might just change everything. That's why we need to talk about it. That's why we must lean into the discomfort. Because the moment you shift your perspective, the moment you realize isolation is a divine corridor to your next elevation, you start asking the right questions. What am I supposed to learn here? Who am I meant to become when this ends? How can I use this time to prepare for the breakthrough that's just around the corner? My hope is that by the time you leave this space, you'll no longer see solitude as a burden, but as a sacred gift. I want you to feel empowered. I want you to understand that this phase isn't permanent, but it is absolutely necessary. I want you to see that every minute of your so-called loneliness could be the exact ingredient you need to transform into something greater. And it's my prayer that each person here walks out with a renewed sense of purpose, a new fire burning within, because you finally get why being alone can set you free. You finally recognize that God's got a plan to take you higher. But first, he needs your full, undistracted attention. So let's dive into this journey together. You see, sometimes we pray for an answer, but we're too preoccupied to hear it. We ask God to elevate us, but we're reluctant to leave behind the noise. We do everything in our power to drown out discomfort, whether it's with social media, endless scrolling, or chasing superficial relationships. That ends today. Today we confront our excuses. Today we flip the narrative. Today we see that the very season we've been trying to escape might be the golden key to unlocking our destiny. Are you ready for that shift? Are you willing to go deep? Are you prepared to embrace solitude, not as punishment, but as prophecy? Because if you're prepared to meet God in the quiet, your world will change in ways you can't even imagine. This is our moment. This is our collective call to discover what stands on the other side of solitude. It could be clarity. It could be strength. It could be the blueprint for a life so big that it dwarfs your fears. So let's journey together into the heart of why God needs you to be alone before your elevation. Let's peel back the layers and uncover how the emptiness can be filled with purpose, how the silence can be the loudest call to action, and how loneliness can transform into liberation. This is your time, right here, right now. Embrace the solitude and prepare for the rise. I want you to pause for a moment and breathe that in, because the next words you hear may speak directly to your spirit. The next realization could be the key that unlocks your next level. I believe you showed up here for a reason. I believe each of us is ready to hear what God has been waiting to say. So let's step forward in faith, trusting that even if we stand alone, we're never truly by ourselves. God is with us. God is guiding us. And that's why this season of solitude may be the single most important stop on your road to elevation. My friends, if you're with me, let's move forward. Let's talk about the profound first reason God needs you alone. There's a divine test in that solitude, a test that reveals your character and proves you're ready for what's next. Think about this. Have you ever experienced a moment where you felt you had reached rock bottom? No calls, no invitations, no one checking up on you? In that moment, you discover what you really believe, who you truly are when no one's watching. That's the test. It's the test that whispers, will you remain faithful when no one's cheering for you? Will you keep going when the applause stops? That's the question that shapes your resilience, your moral code, your integrity. We often say we want to be strong, but you can't test strength in comfort. You test strength in the tough spots where no one's there to pat you on the back. It's that late night grit, that early morning prayer, that meltdown moment where it's just you, four walls, and God. That's where the test happened. Let me share something from my own life. Long before I ever stood on a stage or took on leading roles, I had times when I wasn't sure anyone would ever notice me. I questioned myself. I questioned my future. I thought, Lord, is this it? Did you bring me here just to leave me stranded? But in those silent nights, I began to see how God was building my foundation. He stripped away the superficial. He stripped away everything that wasn't truly me. It wasn't about proving anything to the outside world. It was about proving to myself and to God that I was serious about the path, that I was serious about the calling. What happens if you refuse to recognize this test? You end up stuck repeating the same cycles, blaming the same circumstances, never growing. You'll keep getting frustrated because you're knocking on doors that won't open. But the doors aren't opening because your character isn't ready. Why would God elevate you to a place you can't sustain? If your foundation is shaky, the smallest breeze of adversity will knock you down. And trust me, adversity is coming. It's part of the journey. The question is, will you withstand it? If you skip the test of solitude, you won't have the roots to remain standing when the storms blow in. So how do you know you're in this test? Maybe you're feeling the sting of rejection. Maybe you're hearing no more than yes. Maybe you're losing friends who once seemed like your ride or dies. That's your sign. That's your wake-up call. God is shifting your circle, your environment, your resources, so you have no choice but to develop an inner resilience. Your solution is to lean into it. Instead of asking, why me? Ask, what can I learn here? Swap self-pity for self-reflection. Look at your habits, your mindsets, your relationships. Which of them need to go? Which of them need refining? When you realize God is pruning you, suddenly that loneliness feels less like abandonment and more like alignment. Take, for example, that biblical story where Joseph gets thrown into a pit, sold into slavery, and eventually lands in prison, alone, abandoned, stripped of everything familiar. Yet through that seclusion, God prepared him to interpret dreams, to manage resources, to become a leader for an entire nation. Joseph needed that pit. He needed that prison, because in those hidden places, he developed the backbone required to handle the palace. And the same principle applies to you. This solitude might be the pit phase, the prison phase, but it's also the proving ground for your palace. If you skip it, you can't handle the blessings waiting on the other side. So your first step is to pass the test by embracing it. Recognize that you're being shaped, molded, and refined. You're not being punished. You're being prepared. And each day you stay faithful. Each morning you get up determined to believe in your vision is one more day you grow roots deep enough to carry the weight of your future success. That's the lesson of solitude. It reveals who you really are, and it gives you the strength to become who you were meant to be. Don't fight it. Don't run from it. Embrace it. Pass the tests and watch how God moves you. We're stepping deeper now. We're moving from seeing solitude as a test to recognizing that solitude is a sacred space where you discover clarity about your identity, your mission, and your purpose. It's easy to say, I know who I am, until 10 different people give you 10 different opinions about who you should be. The question is, who are you when the voices fall silent? Who are you when you're not performing for applause, not dancing to someone else's expectations, not striving to fit into a mold that doesn't align with your soul? In solitude, you face those questions head on. Let me ask you this. Have you ever felt confused about your path, your goals, or even your relationships? Then suddenly, after a period of forced downtime, you just knew what to do? That's the gift of solitude. When you unplug from the world, you plug into yourself. And more importantly, you plug into God's voice. Think of solitude like a clearing in the forest. The trees stop crowding your vision. The fog lifts, and suddenly you see the path ahead. You see what you truly want, not what the crowd wants for you. You see the lessons from past mistakes, not through the lens of shame, but through wisdom and understanding. And this clarity shifts how you move through the world. The danger is that if you never allow yourself this space, you stay locked in confusion. You chase every shiny object, follow every new trend, try to be a version of yourself that pleases others. That confusion breeds anxiety. It robs you of peace. It keeps you running in circles, never settling, never rooted. Eventually you wear yourself out because you don't have a sense of who you are separate from the noise. And when God tries to guide you, you're too distracted to notice. You end up missing opportunities that are designed for you because you can't discern what's real and what's just chatter. That's how crucial solitude is. I recall a time early in my career when I was inundated with opinions. Friends told me one thing, agents told me another, family members had their ideas. I was juggling so many voices, I lost touch with my own. It was only when circumstances forced me to take a step back, when I felt alone and uncertain, that I came face to face with my own convictions. I asked myself, what do I really want out of this life? Who am I trying to serve, people or God? Where do I want to leave my mark? In that solitude, I realized I had to reclaim my authenticity, break free from the shackles of other people's expectations, and follow the calling placed within my spirit. The result? Unshakable clarity. And when you have clarity, you make decisions that align with your destiny, not someone else's roadmap. How do you embrace this transformative clarity? Begin with stillness. If you feel restless, good. That means there's something stirring beneath the surface. Resist the urge to numb out with TV, social media, or pointless distractions. Instead, journal your thoughts, pray for guidance, sit quietly even if it feels uncomfortable. Ask yourself questions. Who am I living for? What drives me? What do I refuse to compromise? What truly brings me joy? Let the answers emerge. Then test those answers in prayer or quiet meditation. Seek divine confirmation. If you feel a sense of peace or a burst of energy that lights you up, you're on to something real. Let me give you a real-world example. You ever notice how some of the most groundbreaking ideas in history were born when people isolated themselves? Think of Jesus going into the wilderness for 40 days before his ministry. Think of scientists, artists, and inventors who locked themselves away to bring revolutionary ideas to life. That's no coincidence. When the world's chatter goes silent, your creativity and your capacity to receive divine inspiration skyrocket. You become a conduit for something bigger than yourself. So the solution is simple, but not easy. Cut out unnecessary noise. Decide what truly warrants your attention. Filter out the influences that don't align with your values. You don't have to ghost everyone, just create boundaries. Boundaries with your time, your energy, your focus. Recognize that your clarity is your compass. If you protect it, it will lead you to success. If you neglect it, you'll forever wander lost in the wilderness of other people's opinion. No matter what stage of life you're in, solitude can sharpen your vision. It's an opportunity to define your core principles and set your trajectory based on your God-given calling rather than the shifting tides of public opinion. And here's the lesson. Without solitude, you may never truly know yourself. Without knowing yourself, you can't genuinely offer your gifts to the world. It's in solitude that you discover not just what you can do, but why you're doing it. It's in solitude that you refine your motives, your strengths, and your weaknesses. That self-awareness is the bedrock for any real elevation. You can climb high with height, but you'll only stay there with substance. Clarity gives you substance. Clarity anchors your soul. And once you have it, no obstacle, no opposition, no wave of doubt can keep you from the purpose God has called you to fulfill. Now, you may wonder, what's next after passing the test and finding clarity? That's when we come to the real fire. God uses solitude as a construction site for your transformation. It's where he tears down old frameworks and builds you anew. If you think of your life as a building under renovation, solitude is when God closes the site off to visitors. He puts up that sign that says, authorized personnel only. Why? Because the work is delicate, the plans are intricate, and distractions can compromise the integrity of the structure. So, he needs you alone. He needs you fully present. That's not easy work, but it's necessary if you want to stand tall. Transformation means change, not a superficial change like slapping on a new coat of paint, but a gut renovation, the kind that removes rotting beams and termite-infested floorboards. In this context, those rotting beams could be toxic relationships, destructive habits, or limiting beliefs. The termite infestation might be insecurities eating away at your core, the fear that you're not enough, the doubt that your dreams are too big when you're in the crowd. It's easy to ignore these problems. You can distract yourself with people, with noise, with empty validation. But in solitude, everything comes to the surface. You see your wounds, you see your bitterness, you see your resentments, and you can't hide from them anymore. How does God transform you in solitude? By giving you the space to confront these issues head on. It starts with realization. You suddenly recognize patterns in your life that need to be uprooted. Then comes the emotional work. You wrestle with anger, disappointment, or shame. You bring these emotions to God in prayer, maybe with tears streaming down your face, saying, Lord, Help me let this go. Over time, that raw honesty transforms into strength, forgiveness, and a renewed perspective. It's messy, it's real, it's personal, but it's the process that molds you into someone who can carry the weight of your future blessings without crumbling. If you don't allow this transformation to happen, the cost is enormous. You might achieve a semblance of success, but underneath, you'll still be haunted by unresolved issues. When pressure mounts, the cracks in your foundation will show. You'll self-sabotage, you'll lash out, or you'll crumble under stress. But if you go through that metamorphosis in solitude, you emerge with a fortified heart, a stronger faith, and a renewed sense of self. You become someone who can handle greater responsibility, greater challenges, and greater heights because your inner world has been fortified. Consider the caterpillar that has to spin a cocoon. It's alone in there, undergoing a transformation that is invisible to the outside world. But when it finally breaks free, it's a butterfly with wings to soar. If someone tried to help by cutting open that cocoon too early, the butterfly would never develop the strength it needs to fly. That solitude is essential for its transformation. The same goes for you. If you try to cut corners on this process, you try to rush through it or avoid it altogether, you'll emerge half-formed, with wings too weak to carry you to the heights God intends for you. So how do you navigate this transformative solitude? You do it by surrendering to the process, by trusting that God knows the blueprint for your life better than you do. This might mean letting go of certain relationships that pull you backward, setting new standards for how you treat yourself and others, or forgiving people you once vowed never to forgive. It might mean waking up each day and speaking affirmations over your life, inviting God's presence into your hardest moments, and choosing faith even when fear seems more logical. It's a daily commitment to grow, to evolve, and to keep saying yes to the divine renovation happening inside you. The reward for enduring this uncomfortable, sometimes painful process? Freedom. Freedom from old baggage. Freedom from the fear that once dictated your choices. Freedom from the toxic patterns that kept you chained to mediocrity. You step into your calling without the anchors of the past weighing you down. You become a clearer vessel for God's work. And when the moment of elevation finally arrives, when God swings open that door you've been waiting for, you can walk through it with unshakable confidence, knowing you're truly ready. Because you've been tested. You've found clarity. You've undergone transformation. Remember, you don't walk this road alone. Even in solitude, you have divine companionship. If you can lean on that truth, you'll find the perseverance to keep going, even when the process seems endless. And let me reassure you, this process might be challenging, but it is so worth it. Imagine living a life free from the weight of others' opinions, free from insecurities that once held you back, free from doubts that said you couldn't, free from doubts that said you couldn't. That's what happens when you embrace the transformation that solitude offers. So, my friend, pass the test, embrace the clarity, allow the transformations. Step by step, God is preparing you for your elevation. And no matter how long it takes, know that the wait is not wasted. That cocoon you're in, it's turning you into a force the world has yet to see. It's turning you into someone who can uplift others because you've been through the fire. You've grown your wings in isolation. And when you finally soar, people will look and wonder, how did they become so strong, so focused, so unstoppable? Then you can smile and say, that's what happens when God meets you in solitude and transforms you from the inside out. Now, let's bring all this together. You've heard about the test of solitude, the clarity that emerges when the noise fades, and the radical transformation that can only happen in isolation. Each piece matters. Each phase is an integral step in your journey toward higher ground. Because when God elevates you, He doesn't just want you to stand tall for a moment. He wants you to remain standing, to flourish, and to bless others from that vantage point. Let's take a moment to remind ourselves of what we've uncovered so far. When you find yourself alone, that's your test. God is seeing whether you'll remain faithful, whether you'll develop resilience when there's no crowd to please. If you skip this test, you remain fragile, dependent on applause. You need the solitude to cultivate that inner fortitude. Away from the buzz of constant opinions, you discover who you really are, what you truly want, and where you're genuinely called to go. Without that clarity, you may wander in confusion, always seeking external validation to fill a void only your own authenticity can satisfy. And finally, you undergo transformation, deep gut-level change. In the private chambers of solitude, God tears down what no longer serves you and rebuilds you stronger, sharper, and purer. Without transformation, you might appear successful on the outside, but you'll be corroding within. These lessons teach us a critical truth. Solitude is not the enemy, it's the doorway. We often fight it because it feels uncomfortable. We mislabel it as punishment. Or we think we're unloved, forgotten. But in God's design, solitude is often the workshop of miracles. Once you wrap your mind around that, you stop resisting and start embracing. You stop cursing your season of loneliness and start thanking God for the setup. You realize there's gold in the gravel, light in the darkness, and purpose in the pain. But don't just store this knowledge in your mind, act on it. The single greatest tragedy would be to hear these words, nod in agreement, and then do nothing. So I'm urging you to take a step forward. If you're in a lonely season, start by asking, what is God revealing to me right now? If your friendships have thinned out, look for the new depth God might want to add to your character. If you've been denied opportunities, ask, am I really prepared for what I've been praying for? Use this season as a time to develop new habits, to pray more, to refine your vision. That's what action looks like. And it doesn't stop there. The next layer is accountability. Find a mentor or a trusted friend who respects the sacredness of your journey. Let them walk with you, not as a crutch, but as a mirror to help you see the progress you're making and the blind spots you might miss. Solitude doesn't mean isolation from wise counsel. It means being selective about who has the privilege of speaking into your life. Choose people who push you closer to your calling, not away from it. Also, remember to be patient with yourself. Transformation is rarely instantaneous. You might have moments where you feel like you're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. That's normal. Growth is a process. The key is to stay consistent. Keep getting up. Keep reflecting. Keep listening to that still small voice that's guiding you. Over time, you'll notice subtle shifts in your mindset, your actions, and the way you treat yourself and others. If you find yourself growing weary, remember that God has a track record of using the least likely people in the least likely places during the least likely times to accomplish extraordinary feats. That's a pattern throughout history. Moses in the desert, David in the fields, Joseph in prison, Jesus in the wilderness. Alone, tested, transformed, then elevated. You are not an exception. Your path may look different. Your wilderness may feel uncharted, but the same divine principle applies to you. Now, let's turn our gaze to the horizon of hope. Because a season of solitude is not eternal. It's a chapter, not the entire story. When you do the work, when you let God mold you, eventually you will emerge. And when you do, you'll carry a presence that can't be replicated by someone who's never faced solitude. You'll stand with an authority that comes from deep within, an authority forged in the fires of self-discovery and surrendered faith. You'll speak with a wisdom that rings true because you've lived it. This is how you make a meaningful impact. This is how you become a channel for blessings in the world around you. People will notice the change. Some might cheer you on, and some might question or fear it. That's okay. Your journey isn't for them to approve. God's validation is what matters. When he says you're ready, you're ready. When he opens that door, no human can shut it. That's why the aim is never to rush out of solitude, but to extract every ounce of purpose from it until you know you've evolved into the person capable of handling the next level. Before we wrap this up, let's circle back to the reason you're here. Maybe you're longing for an upgrade in your career, in your relationships, in your spiritual life. You've been praying for a breakthrough, for a sign, for that big moment when everything shifts. But have you considered that maybe, just maybe, God is withholding that moment until you've gleaned everything you need from your current solitude? Until your faith is unshakable, until your identity is clear, until your heart is transformed? That might be the reason your promotion hasn't shown up yet, or your dreams haven't fully materialized. It's not because you're unworthy, it's because God loves you too much to give you something you're not ready to maintain. Take a second to appreciate that kind of love. A love that doesn't just give you what you want, but prepares you to receive it in a way that it can flourish. Sometimes unanswered prayers are the greatest gifts. Sometimes loneliness is the best teacher. Sometimes the darkness of solitude is where you discover the brightest light. Let me leave you with one final vision. Picture yourself emerging from this season fully equipped. Picture waking up one morning feeling strong, clear-headed, driven. There's no more tug-of-war between who you are and who the world wants you to be. You move with purpose. Your decisions carry weight. Your presence brings peace to chaotic situations. And when opportunities knock, you're ready, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. That's the promise of solitude done right. That's the outcome when you let God shape you in private so he can elevate you in public. My friend, I challenge you to see your solitude through new eyes. See it as a divine pause, a gift, a workshop, a greenhouse for your growth. Lean into it. Let go of resentment. Let go of self-pity. Replace them with curiosity, self-examination, prayer, and hope. Because one day you'll look back on this lonely season and realize it was the turning point. It was the cocoon where your wings grew strong enough to fly. It was the night before dawn, the test before the testimony. And when that dawn breaks, when you rise to that next level, you'll carry a story that resonates with others who are still in their lonely seasons. You'll be living proof that solitude isn't the end, it's the beginning. You'll be able to say, I've been there, and I learned what God had for me in that secret place. Now look what he's done. That testimony can heal others, inspire others, and bring glory to the one who orchestrated it all. So, as we conclude, I want to press this into your heart. Don't fear solitude. Don't despise it. Embrace it as a sacred invitation to become who God has called you to be. Because the moment you accept that invitation, you activate a powerful shift in your life. You open the door to growth, clarity, and transformation. You align yourself with a divine plan that's bigger than you can imagine. And that, my friend, is when you become unstoppable. Now, step forward in faith. Use this time wisely. Reflect, pray, work on your weaknesses, develop your strengths. Let your solitude be your stage for inner growth. And when God sees that you're fully prepared, he'll release you into a new realm of possibility. He'll give you that breakthrough you've been waiting for. He'll turn your loneliness into a lighthouse that guides others to their own transformation. Because that's how God works. He refines us in private so he can reward us in public. Remember, this is not about perfection. It's about progression, about taking each day and saying, I'm a bit stronger, I'm a bit wiser, I'm a bit more prepared for what's coming. If you can hold on to that perspective, the journey becomes less daunting and more exhilarating. You stop dreading the quiet moments and start welcoming them as opportunities for deeper revelation. You stop seeing rejections as failures and start viewing them as redirections. You trust that God's timing is perfect. You lean into the fact that everything, yes, everything, is working for your good. So here's your call to action. After this moment, find a quiet space, no phone, no TV, just you and your thoughts. Let the stillness speak to you. Ask God to show you what needs to be pruned, what needs to be nurtured, what needs to be changed. Write it down. Pray over it. Commit to taking at least one step, however small, toward the person you're meant to become. Maybe that step is an apology you've been dreading, or a decision you've been postponing, or a bold move you've been too scared to make. Whatever it is, let the solitude empower you to do it. Let it become the fuel that ignites your transformation. And remember, this is your life, your journey, your calling. Don't hand it over to the opinions of those who haven't walked in your shoes. Don't abandon it because the road feels lonely. Stand firm, look up, and know that every tear, every sleepless night, every unanswered question can become a stepping stone if you're willing to let solitude do its work. I want you to walk out of here with renewed hope, a fire in your belly, and a steadfast belief that God has something extraordinary in store for you. But He needs you to be ready. He needs you to be alone for a little while. So when that spotlight of elevation shines, you're not just standing there empty heart. You're standing there with a heart full of purpose, a mind full of clarity, and a spirit refined by the flames of solitude. That's what makes you unstoppable. That's what makes you a light in a dark world. That's what turns an ordinary life into a testimony of divine grace. So keep going, keep growing, keep trusting in the process. Because when the moment comes, and it will, every second of your solitude will prove itself invaluable. You'll realize God was never punishing you. He was equipping you, even when you couldn't see it, even when it hurt, even when you felt so alone you weren't sure you'd make it. And as you rise, you'll carry a humble gratitude that says, Lord, thank you. Thank you for preparing me in private so I can serve you better in public. That gratitude will become a magnet, drawing more blessings, more opportunities, and more lives you can impact. Now is the time to step into faith. Now is the time to trust that every season, including this lonely one, has a purpose. Now is the time to believe that God's plan for your life is worth every struggle, every tear, every moment of doubt, because on the other side of solitude lies a version of you that you haven't even dared to imagine, a version of you who stands in full authority, brimming with a passion that radiates outward and sparks hope in everyone you meet. When you finally get there, you'll look back on this season with gratitude. You'll understand why God needed you to be alone before your elevation. And you'll stand tall in the knowledge that no time was wasted, no tear was shed in vain, and no prayer went unanswered. Every moment contributed to a masterpiece that only God could orchestrate. A masterpiece that is your life, unfolding in perfect time. So hold on. Stay strong, and remember, solitude is not the end. It's the launch pad for the beginning of a life far greater than you've ever known. Go forth in confidence, and let the world see what happens when God calls one of His own to stand, alone yet never lonely, ready for the rise.